The House Select Committee investigating January 6th convening publicly one last time.
He lost the 2020 election and knew it. In the end, he summoned a mob to Washington, and knowingly they were armed and angry, pointed them to the Capitol and told them to fight like hell.
And laying out its case that former President Donald Trump was ultimately responsible for the attack on the U.S. Capitol.
No man who would behave that way at that moment in time can ever serve in any position of authority in our nation again. He is unfit for any office.
The committee referring multiple crimes to the Justice Department that they say the former president committed while trying to stay in the White House.
We believe that the evidence described by my colleagues today and assembled throughout our hearings warrants a criminal referral of former President Donald J. Trump,
including assisting or aiding an insurrection, conspiracy to defraud the United States, obstruction of an official proceeding, and conspiracy to make false statements. It believes there is sufficient evidence for two others: conspiracy to injure or impede an officer and seditious conspiracy. The panel also referring attorney and Trump ally John Eastman to DOJ, but saying DOJ will have to determine who else should face prosecution.
Our understanding of the role of many individuals may be incomplete even today because they refuse to answer our questions. We trust that the Department of Justice will be able to form a far more complete picture.
Republican lawmakers who snubbed committee subpoenas referred to the House Ethics Committee. After 17 months of investigating and roughly 1,000 witness interviews, the committee determined that Trump knew the fraud allegations he was pushing were false, but continued to amplify them anyway.
The committee has evidence that ex-President Trump planned to declare victory and unlawfully to call for the vote counting to stop, and that he told numerous allies about his intent in the weeks before the election.
Hope, say a couple of words.
Even as some of Trump's closest allies, like Hope Hicks, worried the bogus fraud claims were damaging his legacy, Trump persisted.
He said something along the lines of, nobody will care about my legacy if I lose. So that won't matter. The only thing that matters is winning.
Trump worked on a scheme to transmit false Electoral College ballots and replace Department of Justice leadership with one that would do his bidding, even pressuring his own vice president.
President Trump spearheaded an unprecedented campaign to coerce him to do it anyway, ultimately culminating in a dangerous threat to Mr. Pence's life on January 6th.
The committee also highlighting Trump's $250 million fundraising haul between the election and January 6th, raised primarily off claims of election fraud that did not exist, questioning whether any of the money was used to pay lawyers who may have tried to obstruct the congressional investigation, and evidence from one unnamed witness who was urged to stay loyal to Trump.
The witness believed this was an effort to affect her testimony, and we are concerned that these efforts may have been a strategy to prevent the committee from finding the truth.
Now look, DOJ may be interested in evidence the committee has to provide if they do believe there was some kind of obstruction, but I think what we are already hearing from witnesses, including that lawyer from John Eastman, is that these referrals from the committee are not legally binding. They don't hold any more weight than a referral from an American citizen. The attorney from Eastman also said that the committee missed an opportunity to make real legislative changes by pursuing a pretend criminal case. Jake.
All right, Sarah Murray on Capitol Hill for us. Thank you so much. Let's bring in January 6th committee member, Democratic Congresswoman Elaine Luria of Virginia. First, let me just get your response to the attorney for Mr. Eastman saying that these referrals carry no more weight than any other referral from any other American citizen, and basically attacking the committee.
Well, I think this has been a standard practice over the course of our investigation that people attempt to attack the committee, discredit the committee, rather than focus on the real issue here, is that we have a former president of the United States who essentially attempted to stay in office after he lost an election.
There was also a comment that Mike Pence made. He attacked the partisan nature of the committee, blah, blah, blah. But the other thing that I thought was interesting is this is how he spins it. He said today, look, as I wrote in my book, I think the president's actions and words on January 6th were reckless, but I don't know that it's criminal to take bad advice from lawyers. What do you make of that?
I'm actually kind of tired of Mike Pence trying to have it both ways. You know, he really takes the limelight and likes to be portrayed as a hero because he did his job and followed the law, but at the same time then, goes back and tries to attack a committee that is bipartisan. Really, it's been one of the most bipartisan committees in the House in the way we've worked together and presented the evidence. And the facts are the facts. And he has tried to discredit it in the public sphere. Many have tried to undermine the nature of the composition of the committee through the courts, and the courts have clearly rejected that. The truth is we did our job as a congressional committee. It's for oversight and legislation. We've laid out the facts. We've painted a very clear picture for the American people of what led up to and happened on that day. It's spelled out in our report. The executive summary is out today, later this week. The full comprehensive report will be out along with all of the testimony. In the executive summary, look at the witnesses we have in there. 99% of them are Republicans who served in the Trump administration, and many of them were appointed by Trump himself and confirmed by his Republican Senate. And those are the people who had the courage to come forward and speak and talk about the facts. So, people who continue to evade the questions of the committee and try to undermine the committee as a committee within Congress, Mr. Eastman's lawyer said, it wasn't worth any more than, potentially any citizen saying it. It's kind of just hot air. It's deflection, I think. And, to get back to the point is all of this should be focused on the facts. And we laid that out today. And our referrals, it's true that they don't carry the weight of law. And it's also true, and I've said this early on, the Attorney General, Mr. Garland, you don't have to wait for us. And they haven't. They've been running with this investigation. And, since we're not coordinating their efforts, I look at it as like a relay with passing off a baton. The runner receiving the baton is already running, and they've got to keep going with it. So I think we've, our committee is coming to an end because the end of this Congress, we've issued our report. And, we've passed this off to the Department of Justice with the full information we've gathered. And we recommend that they look at criminal activity of the people starting at the top with President Trump, former President Trump.
So I know that the committee was, the select committee was only formed for this one Congress. But I also know that, midterm elections generally swing the way this one swung. Kevin McCarthy or whoever the Republican speaker becomes was going to kill the committee, even if it had been put in there for more than one term. And I'm wondering if you felt like you had enough time and resources to investigate everything you wanted to when it came to the insurrection.
I think that we did a comprehensive investigation talking to 1,000 witnesses, roughly hundreds of thousands of documents, including a huge tranche of information from the Secret Service. This is not the end of this. We look at this as really the beginning in a sense. As we said in the hearing today, for the Department of Justice to take the information that we've gathered along with what they've gathered. And the end of this is holding people accountable and making sure something like this doesn't happen again. So there's more to be done than we had time and ultimately resources for.
Do you think the Justice Department would have been as aggressive as they've been? And I know there are a lot of people who think they haven't been aggressive enough. But they did get guilty pleas for the Oath Keepers on seditious conspiracy. There have been other charges, and who knows what's going to come. Do you think that they would have done as much as they did if it hadn't been for the January 6th committee kind of blazing a trail? And on that subject, why shouldn't the Senate form, now that Democrats have 51 votes and they can form committees and have subpoena power, et cetera, why shouldn't the Senate take up this charge now? They were attacked too.
Well, as far as the Department of Justice, I think it's a lot of speculation in some regards. We know the Department of Justice has been investigating. I looked at it as concentric circles. It started on the outside. They started with the people who they had direct evidence of trespassing, vandalism, attacking police officers. And they were 900 people have been charged. And we kind of started at the center and worked our way out. So this is, I think, the point when those two concentric investigations have converged. We're passing it off to the Department of Justice, and I would like to see them go all the way to the top and hold those people in the highest levels of trust of the American people, as the former president and others who have failed to come speak to the committee under subpoena, to hold those people accountable where applicable. And the other thing about the Senate is I certainly think the Senate, having a Democratic majority with 51 votes, has the capability to take, especially the recommendations, the legislative recommendations that we've laid out, and move forward with those in applicable committees of jurisdiction to make sure that we can actually act on them. It was always a concern of mine is we can lay out what our recommendations are legislatively to process-wise within different agencies and departments in the government to prevent something like this in the future, but not holding the majority in the House past these midterms. We know Kevin McCarthy, Jim Jordan, they want to come in. The very people who didn't comply with subpoenas of the House want to be the Speaker of the House, and they want to be the chair of the Judiciary Committee in the House, and they want to enforce subpoenas that they wouldn't even answer themselves. And how ironic is that?